Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Pulp, a 2021 graphic novel written by Ed Brubaker and drawn by Sean Phillips, the dynamic duo of crime fiction in comic book form. I'm kind of fascinated by Ed Brubaker's whole career. In the 90s, he came out as a total independent cartoonist, not necessarily self-published, but, indie publishers doing auto-bio stuff. He was like hanging out with guys like Jason Lutz, the guys who Fantagraphics guys, drawn it quarterly. And then he took a left turn and somehow became like one of the biggest Marvel Comics writers ever, and DC. And he had long runs on Captain America. He created the Winter Soldier, long runs on the X-Men. Over at DC, I think he did Catwoman for a while, Batman. And then after 10 years of that, being on the top of his game in the mainstream superhero field, he said, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to do like crime fiction. So he teamed up with Sean Phillips, the great English cartoonist, did tons of stuff for Vertigo over the decades, and some mainstream stuff. But he doesn't have a mainstream style. He has a style that's perfect for crime fiction. So these guys teamed up, and over the past 20 years, roughly, they've been cranking out just a steady stream of great crime fiction miniseries, unlimited series, standalone graphic novels. I've never read one, so I'm saying they're great just because every review I've read of these for the past 20 years has said how great they are. Every time one comes out, they're like, another triumph from Brubaker and Phillips. These guys can do no wrong. So I've been reading about these kind of noirish crime series they've been doing for years. I was thinking, that sounds pretty good. I kind of want to read one of those. But thanks to a generous donation, a generous endowment from the Archibald Gernsback Foundation, who sent this in a big box of comics to me last week, I can now read it for myself, which I actually did today on the bus. And I fucking loved it. Brubaker's a really good storyteller. This is just a great piece of genre fiction. And of course, art by Sean Phillips is pretty damn nice. I also forgot to mention that last episode, we looked at The Barn of Fear. That was also due to an endowment from the Archibald Gernsback Foundation. I forgot to mention it, so I apologize for that. I wish more people would send me comics to review because I don't have much money. So eventually I'm not going to have any comics to review. Actually, that's not going to happen first. I'll definitely die before then, the way things are going. So let's crack this open, check it out. Kind of a thin graphic novel, not that big. The title page. This is colored by Jacob Phillips, Sean Phillips' son. So we start off with this kind of the typical beginning of a noir novel. This character looks like he's dying. I could tell you when it all started, on the day I almost died for the third time. But really, it's kind of a complicated story with lots of beginnings. But that's what life is, right? A bunch of beginnings piled up on top of each other. All the chances you had not to mess it up. To not mess it up. So it's very, that kind of writing, pulpish. We start off in New York City, February 1939. But then the story seems to be a typical Western scene. We see this guy, the Red River Kid, seems to be the hero of the story that we just started. Is having a typical showdown, with a bad guy. He kills him. Him and his friend ride off. I wanted to mention the colors here. Just very odd, very sloppy. And I'll tell you why in a second, though, why I think they're this way. But it's so much of the coloring in this book isn't like necessarily aesthetically pleasing to me, but it really suits the story. And maybe you'll agree with me as we flip through. It's very odd coloring like this. Look at this. It doesn't even stay within the lines here. It's just like... So this is why the coloring is so different. That was an excerpt from our protagonist's pulp store that he's handing off to his editor. So our protagonist here, Max, he's an old guy. He's pretty old. And, of course, his editor is always trying to chintz him down, editing his work. And basically his attitude is like, you should be grateful. It's the middle of the Depression. You should be grateful you're getting any money. So shut up and quit complaining. I don't know if Sean Phillips painted this or they just found an old Pulp cover and added their own logo here. But it's a pretty nice painting. So this is Sean Phillips' art. I mean, he's been drawing like this for decades. It's beautiful stuff. Classic, great, comic book stuff. His name's Max Winters, by the way. So he goes out into the streets, pretty peeved that his editor is like, oh, we only pay 2 cents a word now, so your check's going to be smaller. And while he's on the subway, he sees these 2 bullies picking on a Hasidic kid. And he stands up to him. And we can tell from his narration boxes, his captions, that he used to be a tough guy, but now he's pretty old. And he hasn't been in a fight in years, probably. But he can't stand to see this shit. So he says, leave the kid alone. And then these guys beat the shit out of him. He has no chance. And he has a heart attack. They beat the shit out of him, take his money, and nobody on the subway platform does a damn thing. So he blacks out. And he has a flashback to the first time he almost died. And I guess he was, him and his brother and his best friend were caught in a range war. They were in the middle of a range war. And basically these 2 gangs wanted their land, and they burned him out. And as they were escaping, they were shooting at him. They killed his brother, and then they shot him in the back as he was riding away. He almost dies, but he makes it to the doctor, and the doctor saves his life. So see, here we have flashback, crazy colors again. Looks like a Crayola colors. But it works. It's a good signifier that, like, okay, we're in the past. Without having to have a caption that says, 30 years ago. So him and his friend, they basically, after he recovers, Max and his friend track down those guys that killed his brother. And they kill them. They kill the bad guys. So now we're back in 1939. After one night in the hospital, they send him home. And he doesn't even have money for taxi fare because they took all his money. And so he has to walk all the way home, and he can feel the pressure on his heart, and he's scared. But then we find out the reason why he's scared. He's not really scared of dying, this guy. He knows that he's escaped death many times. He's pushed his luck, but it's because of Rosa, his wife. So we meet Rosa. He explains himself. He lies to her, though. He doesn't tell her about the heart attack. He says, I just got mugged. He doesn't want her to worry. Man, look at that face. Sean Phillips, so good. So he totally realizes, like, yeah, that's why I'm so terrified, because I could die any day now. And, his wife, they don't have a lot of money. And his wife always wanted a little house in Queens to retire to. And he doesn't want to die. He's terrified of dying, not leaving Rosa with enough money to survive. That's his fear. A little flashback to when he met Rosa. It sounds like she saved him. He was like on a bender for 10 years, just a drunk. And he met her, and she changed his life. We also find out that he was married before this and has a daughter. That's what sent him on the bender. The fact that we'll find out later, but that they aren't around anymore. So he goes back to his editor, tries to get another gig, finds out that the publisher's nephew is now writing his character, what's his name? The Red Rock Kid, something like that. The Red River Kid. Of course, just like in the comic industry, they're like, hey, did you ever check your payment vouchers? We own all the rights to the Red River Kid. You're just our employee. And it gives him another heart attack. I like, this is a really interesting way to show this. They with a computer, they fade out the letters to show like what it sounds like if you're having a heart attack. All the voices fade away. Never saw that done before. Pretty good. It's a good tool for storytellers. So he gets home. I guess it was just a mild heart throb or whatever, heart palpitation. And his wife says, let's go out tonight. And he says, sure. So they go to see the movies. They see the Nazis, newsreel footage of Hitler in Germany. And Rosa says, you know, the Nazis, they're here. They're marching in Times Square next week. This is a real historical event, by the way. There's a lot of American Nazis who were sympathetic to Hitler. So as he's leaving, he notices something. Because, you know, he used to be a hold-up man in the Old West. And he sees that the profits from this theater is just handed to this security guard. And just for old time's sake almost, he's like, hey, maybe I'll follow this truck. Maybe this is something I can do. And then he has more flashbacks to just talking about how after they got revenge for after he got revenge for his brother, him and his buddy became total outlaws. Started robbing stagecoaches, and Max totally took a liking to the lifestyle. It's like, this is the job I was born to do, be a criminal. Once again, we see that bizarro coloring. So he tails this truck for a while. Realizes that they're pretty lax, the security. He's like, I could do this. And he starts planning a heist. He hasn't done this in, 20, 30 years. He still has a gun. And in broad daylight, he's gonna nab the money from this security truck. And at the last second, this guy stops him. And he seems to know exactly what he was going to do. He says, don't do it. They'll gun you down before you even walk off the sidewalk. He says, is this what you want, Max? And he says, do I know you, mister? So I want to point out the shading here. This is almost like Hugo Pratt shit where, like, that shouldn't work. Or like Kirby's stuff. Well, it's even weirder than Kirby. But, you know, I don't know. When you look at it quick, it does. But look at this crazy shading here. So basically, it turns out this guy's name is Jeremiah Goldman. And he says, let me buy you a drink. And I'll tell you why I know you. So it turns out this guy used to be a Pinkerton agent. This guy used to be one of the guys who hunted Max and his cohorts all those years ago. And he started reading the Pulp stories. I guess Max barely concealed the fact that he was writing about his old days as an outlaw. You know, he used to be called the Red Rock Kid in real life. You know, there's wanted posters for him. He changed it to the Red River Kid. So Jeremiah happened to read some of these pulps and said, wait a second, I think this is that guy. And, you know, used his detective skills and figured out it was. And that's how we ran into him. So basically he says, I want you to help me pull a robbery. I really love his art. And so he tells them that the plan is that, he says, we're going to steal money who deserve to be stolen from, the fucking Nazis. So basically in the 30s, there was an American group called the Bund, and they were American Nazis. They had millions of members. It's kind of frightening seeing these old newsreel footage of, Bund camps where there's like 20,000 people all Sieg Heiling with the American flag right next to the Nazi flag. It's almost like Man in the High Castle shit from Philip K. Dick. But these films exist. It's pretty scary. So basically, there's going to be a lot of anti-fascist protesters at that thing. So Jeremiah actually has a great plan. He's not going to rob the box office of Madison Square Garden. He's going to, because that's where the rally is being held. He's going to rob the actual Bund office, this German front for the Bund, because he's been observing them, and every week, they notice that there's a shipment of money that they bring right to the docks and send off to Germany. He found out about this because his downstairs neighbor, this sweet girl Franny, her older brother is in the Bund. He's also a brutal asshole who's always abusing his sister, yelling at her, hitting her. So he started shadowing him just to put him away, just to get rid of another Bund. And that's how he found out about this whole thing of sending cash to Hitler and to the Nazis. So, of course, all the cops are going to be guarding Madison Square Garden. There's going to be all these protesters. And so all the cops in the city are going to be there. So it's a really good plan. And he stays awake all night thinking about it. And he's in. So they're casing the joint from a rooftop across the way. His colors are really interesting. They're not my favorite colors, but I think they're just perfect for this story. Like, I usually don't like this kind of monochrome coloring, but it really fits. I love this friendship. Well, I don't know if it's a friendship, but they seem at ease around each other, even though they were mortal enemies 30 years ago. And they're even trading war stories like, oh yeah, sorry about killing that one guy in your gang. And Max is like, don't worry, he was an asshole. So they're planning their little heist. There we see Franny with a black eye. Her brother's a real turd. So they go in the alley. This is the night of the heist. The rally has started, so they realize it's time. There's a guy outside, kind of guarding the back door. And Max takes him out, shoots him in the shoulder. And then Jeremiah knocks him out with the butt of his gun. Oh, I'm sorry. Jeremiah took the guy out because Max kind of froze. Max is a little, he's a little rusty. They break in. There's a couple of Nazis there. And all of a sudden, Max realizes that, a lot of times the best laid plans of mice and men can go wrong. But the problem tonight is that Jeremiah doesn't seem to be following the plan that they made. And Max realizes that there's no money. He just wants these documents. Jeremiah wants these documents of the Bund. He's not even asking about money. The two Bund guys are like, what are you talking about? There's no money here. There never is. And Max realizes that he's been had, and Jeremiah's using him. And unfortunately, right then, Max has another heart attack, or at least a palpitation. The guy from outside who they shot in the shoulder. I guess he's okay. Runs in firing. Turns into a big shootout. Definitely not part of the plan. And they make it to their car. Max is driving. And the whole time, he's feeling worse and worse. His chest pains are getting more painful. Jeremiah has a Tommy gun. He takes out the pursuing Nazi car. And then Max has another heart attack. And notice the words get all blurry again. I could picture these guys doing a Great Torpedo story. Now we see another flashback. And I guess in real life, Max went down to Mexico, quit his thieving ways, worked the land, and he met his wife and had a daughter. His buddy Spike, he didn't take to sedentary life, though. He missed the action, and he basically became a horrible alcoholic and died, drunk himself to death. He wakes up in the hospital. Jeremiah's apologetic, but he did it for a good reason. He basically, Jeremiah, if you didn't get it by his last name Goldman, he's Jewish. And he says, I needed those papers because this is a record of everyone who's donated to the Nazi cause. Some of the most important Americans are secretly Nazis. And Max says, why didn't you just tell me the truth? And he says, you wouldn't have gotten along with it. Your last name isn't Goldman. You're not a Jew. So Max is just like, it's not going to make any difference. The monsters always win. And Jeremiah says, well, maybe not this time. But Jeremiah does pay him. I guess Jeremiah's got some money. He basically gives him a deed to a house in Queens and $8,000. So his wife will be taken care of no matter what happens. At least she'll have her beautiful little cottage in Queens. He signs everything over to Rosa. And he finds himself thinking about Jeremiah Goldman. He's basically mad at himself because, fucking trusting a Pinkerton. What was I thinking? Yeah, I guess the reason why he's not a Pinkerton anymore is because, Henry Ford was one of the biggest employer of the Pinkertons. They were his union busters because he didn't like unions, but even more than unions, Henry Ford hated Jews. He was a rabid anti-Semite. So when he found out that one of the Pinkertons was a Jew, Jeremiah, he got him fired. So the next day, Max is looking in the paper. Nazi-linked banker resigns in disgrace. And he whispers to himself, nice work, Jeremiah. I guess sometimes you can kill the monsters. He goes to visit Jeremiah to basically congratulate him. And Jeremiah's being carried out to an ambulance. He's dead from a broken neck. Supposedly he fell down the stairs. When he runs inside, Franny's there. And she basically tells him what really happened. Her brother was hitting her once again. Jeremiah tried to stop him, and then his friends, the brother and his friends, threw him over the railing. And so all Max asks her, he says, what's your brother's name? I won't tell the police, I just need his name. So he goes into Jeremiah's apartment, and Jeremiah's got all these files, he's got a map. He's been hunting these Bund for years now. And he finds out the address of this beer house, Bund Only Club. But he's got all this information, so he says, hey, I'm supposed to meet Arnie Weber. That's the brother of Franny. So the guy lets him in. He figures, he knows Arnie. He's kosher. Actually, that's the wrong word to use. He's cool. Goes in, confronts Arnie. And he says, are you Arnie Weber? Yeah, who's asking? A friend of Jeremiah Goldman's. He blows off his head with a shotgun. I love this the whole time, the narration over this, the captions. He's talking about how, you know, when we were outlaws, we kind of thought we were like Robin Hood. We were heroic. But we weren't heroes. We were killers. That's the reason we survived for so long. Because this world belongs to the monsters. So we interject all these flashback scenes back to his outlaw days while he's killing all these Bund. I mean, he knew it was a suicide mission. He can't take this. Everyone's got guns here. And finally, someone puts a bullet in him. A bunch of bullets, it looks like. And then his last thought, going back to the first page, is, anyway, that's how it all happened. And that's the end. 2 black pages. Man, that is some good noir. Here's some historical information. And here's some of the actual stuff I was talking about. Look at this. All these Nazis with a George Washington thing, but swastikas and American flags. 22,000 Nazis hold rally in Garden. Over 1,300 cops were called out to guard the Nazis. And that's it. We got some ads for other crime fiction from these two and their biographies. So I gotta say, guys, I fucking love this story. I was just like, I was on the bus and I didn't want my bus trip to end. I was just like, oh man, this is riveting. And I just love the idea of like this old time guy, this old timer just taking on the Nazis in 1939. The writing is totally great. Ed Brubaker is a really good writer. And I'm glad that years of writing, the X-Men and stuff didn't dull his writing abilities. Just really sharp writing. Just good all around. The art's beautiful. These are really good. I know most of you shaking your head and like, no shit, moron. They've been doing them for 20 years. But this is new to me. I finally read one, and I'm going to read more. Archibald Gernsback actually sent me Reckless, which is the first of a series. But, I'll look at that later. I got other fish to fry in the meantime. But I'm really glad I read this. Really glad I own it now. And I'm definitely going to be seeking out more of these crime fiction graphic novels and series from these two. Hope you guys enjoyed looking at it as much as I enjoyed reading it. And I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.